Imagine for just a moment, it's a Tuesday. Seems like a pretty average Tuesday, right? There's a big WWE pay per view. There was a big AEW pay per view. There was a very significant episode of Monday Night Raw, and you have a wrestling podcast like this one. And so early Tuesday, you record your episode covering those two pay per views. You're like, I'm did pretty good today. Go home, you spend time with your family, you watch Tuesday night's NXT program. And on that program is Jordan Grace in the TNA Knockouts champion. Blows up the wrestling world. You've already had your episode set for that week. So since then, NXT has been back on air. And now you get to record your next episode. She's been on WWE programming twice in the last couple of weeks since the last episode was recorded. This is where I am now. I thought about doing some short video that just like, oh my God, Jordan Grace. Because I don't know if you all know this. I've been a huge Jordan Grace fan. Years. Like her Twitter still said Patricia when I first started following her. She was still, Trisha Parker on Twitter when I started following her. The change in her style, the change in her physical change, her literal body change, and basically her wrestling stock has increased. I've been a fan for a very long time. And when this significant moment happens, I'm not here to cover it. It's been covered to death at this point. I'm not going to cover how significant it is that Jordan Grace is competing this Sunday at Battleground for the NXT Women's Championship. Crazy, right? I thought about it. And with Rhea Ripley gone, with no mommy, Becky Lynch, technically a free agent, so the man's not coming around. The most talked about significant woman in all of WWE is the TNA Women's Knockouts champion, Jordan Grace. That's insane. So, what am I here talking about? Well, the banner should tell you that I'm talking about. I'll get to that in a second. Why did I mention Jordan Grace? One, because it's the most significant thing in professional wrestling right now, in my opinion. But two, because Jordan Grace recently posted a tweet, and it's this tweet that has inspired what will be this episode, the next episode, and the episode after that, barring something extravagant happening in wrestling. The tweet says, I wrote it down. Want intergender tag titles so bad. Now, I can't lie. Anyone's familiar knows that she had previously tagged with W. Morrissey at the time when he was in TNA. When he was in Impact. He's Big Bill now. He's part of the Learning Tree with Jericho. Guy who's 7 feet tall. Can't teach that. That guy. And they competed for the tag team championships at one point. So the idea of Jordan Grace tagging with another man to be this intergender tag team and then having that springboard into a different championship, not so wild. Recently, people had discussed in AEW news relationship, the common bond um, between Orange Cassidy and Willow Nightingale, as they're both fighting the new Don Callis people of Trent Beretta and uh, Chris Statlander. So a lot of people are talking. Maybe we are going to get some intergender tag team championships around somewhere in this field. If I'm not mistaken, AAA already has an intergender tag team championship. And I think it was at one point it was Sammy Guevara and Ty Mello that held those championships um, at least once on AEW television. Could have been wrong about that. They were champions, but I don't know if they actually showed up on AEW. Why am I bringing all this up? Because when I saw this initial tweet, and there's a TNA group on Facebook that I'm in, hopefully maybe not for long, but people started to discuss this idea of these new championships and talking about how they need to go ahead and do this and have that intergender tag team championship. To that I say, absolutely not. So the more I think about it, the more I realize professional wrestling has far too many championships. There's going to be a lot of explanations, and people are going to say that there's so many more reasons for this, that, and the third. No, no, there are too many titles in professional wrestling as a whole. It's not an AEW thing, it's not a WWE thing. It's in professional wrestling collectively. Same group, different day. In fact, this was just maybe this morning. Someone had posted in that same group about there needing to be right. It was about AJ Francis, Dalla, talking about. By the way, if you follow AJ Francis on Twitter because he's hilarious. Shout out AJ Francis. Shout out AJ Francis, the new digital media champion as of last night, officially as of last night. Make that money, homie. He's outside. If you need to find him, he's outside. With him winning the digital media championship, they were saying that there needs to be a separate digital media championship for the knockouts, and then to have this championship, and then a separate one for the knockouts. And everyone wants to have all these extra championships. And I'm like, please stop. Please stop. For the love of God, please stop. Stop with the titles. Stop with the belts. And this episode's it's kind of ranty, and this is the reason why. I feel like this is an angle that it's a hot take almost. Where either side of this argument's a hot take. There are so many people who believe that we should have, your primary championships, your world titles, and then a secondary title, a stepping stone uh, level to be on, and then whatever you do for the men, there must be an equal one for the women, and then this should be just across the board all the way down. And while I'm all here for equality, I am not so ignorant to the ways of things to believe that out of all of this, the answer is more titles, more titles, more titles, more titles. You know me. If you pay attention to me long enough, you know that if I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to give examples. Let's get with it. There are essentially three major companies in North America for professional wrestling. This is no diss to the NWA. They're just not really part of this particular conversation. The WWE, AEW, and TNA. Let's talk about it. WWE. This is the current list at current. Like, you look at SmackDown live tonight, June 7th, live from Louisville, Kentucky, the KFC Yum Center downtown. Shout out Louisville. This is how many championships that company, not so much SmackDown, but that company represents. We'll talk about it. They have the WWE Championship, the World Heavyweight Championship, the Women's Championship, the Women's World Championship, World Tag Team titles, WWE Tag Team titles, the Women's Tag Team titles, the Intercontinental Championship, the United States Championship, fuck Logan Paul. They have that WWE Speed Championship from their weird Twitter show. Of course, none of that has anything to do with NXT because in NXT, which they have the NXT Championship, the NXT Women's Championship, the NXT North American Championship. As of Sunday, this upcoming Sunday, they will crown a brand new women's North American Championship. My pick right here, right now, Jada Parker. Miss Parker's got it. This is all Miss Parker. I'd give credence to Lash Legend. My pick will be one of those two. My number one pick is Jada Parker. So this game is all about Miss Parker right now. That's not to disparage any of the other women involved. You got Michin, Belen Henley, said Lash, said Jada, Sol Ruka. I can't remember who the sixth woman is off the top of my head right now. But shout out Lash Legend. Shout out to Jada Parker, who I got winning. Michin would be a great pick also. But let's not ignore that this is a match that you need to watch. This is completely sidebar. This is a match that you need to watch. The pay-per-view is going to be great. It's going to have Trick Williams versus Ethan Page, and that's significant too. We're not even talking about the Ethan Page stuff. But there's going to be ladders involved. This is a ladder match, a 6-woman ladder match with Sol Ruka, who, as of right now, has my absolute favorite finishing maneuver. The Soul Crusher. That is the most beautiful cutter I've ever seen in my entire life. A lot of people use the cutter. Cody uses the cutter. Sammy Guevara uses cutters. Jon Moxley uses cutters. Obviously, Randy Orton uses cutters. DDP has his cutter. Technically, Austin Stone Cold Stunner and thusly Kevin Owens and the Hardy Boys use the Twisted Fate. Those are all technically cutters. Dishes. That's not getting cut out. That's in there. Those are all cutters. But this Soul Snatcher, Soul Crusher, Soul Snatcher. That's what it's called, I believe. The Soul Snatcher, the most beautiful move. It's typically executed in the corner. She does like a undercut, tuck, cut. It's glorious. There are ladders involved. She recently did that move off the middle rope. It was 10 times better off the middle rope than it is out of the corner. Soul Snatcher off a ladder cannot be missed. Call it today. I call it right now. It is 10:14 a.m. June 7th. Soul Snatcher off a ladder. Once it's all said and done, regardless of who's champion, that clip will be one of the most viral clips from that entire show. Right now, right this exact moment, I feel it in my soul. Sol Ruka and whoever's going to have the move executed on are planning out how it's going to fit into the match right now. Shawn Michaels is booking this thing. Whoever the producer for this match is going to be is working on that right now. Period. That's something you're going to want to watch. Back to championships. But as of Sunday, there's going to be a Women's North American Championship. Aside from that, you have the NXT Tag Team Championships and the Heritage Cup Championship. A lot. When I read the list, I thought there's no way that that's actually how many titles that they all have is all of WWE. There are 16 titles. And including the fact that there are tag titles, there are 19 champions. 19 people who carry belts. Now, when you look at this, you're like, listen, Moon, I get it, but there's 3 different brands, and each brand is operating separately from each other. And therefore, each show has to have its primary championship. There's a reason I use that phrase. Its women's championship, and then a secondary championship. A primary, a secondary, a women's championship, and then tag titles. And Raw has we'll talk about SmackDown since that's tonight. The WWE Championship, the United States Championship, the Women's WWE Championship, and the tags. So that checks out. And that's 4, primarily 4 for Raw, 4 for SmackDown. That's 8. You will have a primary, a secondary, a women's, and then a women's secondary. That's 4 titles. That's 12, counting NXT. There's the Heritage Cup, and then tags. It's a lot of titles, and I get that, and I get why there's so many over the conglomerate 3 brands of WWE. But that's 19 champions. And I am not in any way criticizing the creation of these new championships, creation of the Women's North American Championship. Everyone's hyped. You just heard me stop this whole broadcast to tell you how high I am for that match. I'm here for it. Will I be waiting all weekend for that particular match at this particular show? Yes. Will I be celebrating Jada Parker as the new North American champion? Yes, I will. Will I be excited when the new breakout star is the women's breakout star is going to have a choice between which women's champion she's going to go for? Absolutely. And this is where we're going to. I'm going to touch on this in a little bit more specifically. This is it. This is it, man. This is the problem. There are so many opportunities. I look at WWE, and more specifically, I look at NXT. I remember a time when all they had was the NXT Championship. With the NXT Championship, everybody went for the NXT Championship. The champion knew who was, coming after him. Literally everyone. Like that. Now, even then, I would say, it'd be nice if they had something else to do so that when these people were in a program, these people could also be in a program to do something. But you can tell story without championship. I covered this a few times as we were approaching WrestleMania, that you don't need a championship necessarily to tell a good story. Roman Reigns versus The Rock was a great story, a match that everyone still wants to see, but it doesn't need the championship. Between Rumble and Mania, there was a lot of conversation that maybe Roman should lose it prior to Mania so that Cody Rhodes could go for the championship, even though he wants to beat Roman. He could go for the championship, and Roman can face The Rock without having to do whatever the hell we ended up doing at WrestleMania, whatever the fuck that was, with the passing and the trading opportunities and then fighting to argue to get it back and then doing the tag team match before you do the other. That was a mess. That was a mess. Would have been perfectly fine if we had just had someone like Randy Orton win it in a triple threat. There actually was a fatal four way, if I'm not mistaken, at Rumble. The triple threat or a fatal four way, one of the two. And either one of the other participants could have won the championship off of Roman without beating Roman. And I get it. I do get it. That is not how we wanted that title reign to end. That is not how we wanted the new championship reign to begin. And there have been a lot more issues with that than not. So we can talk ourselves in circles about that, which is why I'll digress. But with so many championships, so much opportunity, I feel like it devalues the championship. It weakens the stories that we're telling if every major story has to be told around the title and every major story has to culminate at WrestleMania. Consider this. Imagine if every significant story, Rhea Ripley's story, Roman's story, Gunther's story, had to end at WrestleMania. Like nothing significant was going to happen at SummerSlam. Nothing significant was going to happen at Survivor Series. Nothing significant was going to happen at the Royal Rumble. And nothing significant was going to happen at your backlashes, your elimination chambers, your other pay-per-views. If only the big stories ended at WrestleMania, why even bother doing the other ones? Why bother? And in that, with these other pay-per-views, that's space, that's room for other stories to be told. And if you can tell really good stories away from the championship, then you don't need as many championships. Storytelling. There's more. AEW. Now, as I was thinking about this particular episode, it was kind of led in from last week's. Um, the big problem, and this is kind of where this is where I was going with last week's episode. I don't understand the championship division. And this gets muddy because there are indeed so many championships. You can make an argument that WWE gets away with having so many championships because there are Raw titles, NXT titles, SmackDown titles. And because there are Raw titles and NXT titles and SmackDown titles, you're really not looking at the championships of WWE, really looking at the championships of Raw, which is a world, a secondary, a women's, and your tag. It's just four. Just four. Same for SmackDown. Add in the women's tag team championships, which go through technically all three brands. Though the women's tag team championships have not been on NXT in a while, and I would like to see that change. That's me just putting that out there. That's a clear cut situation. Even in the NXT situation, like I said, you've got people who go for the top titles, NXT, NXT Women's, and then you have those who go for your North American championships. So while you've got Trick Williams and Ethan Page here, you're going to have Obafemi and whoever else over here. That's fine. And then tell some secondary stories over there. Same thing for the women now. It's perfectly fine. Roxanne Perez can have her marquee match against Jordan Grace. That's still nuts. And then you can have your Jada Parker versus Sol Ruka or whatever. Write those down. I said them first. And you can make arguments for that. Ain't no excuse for this one. There's no excuse here. Let's cover. Now, I'm slightly unfair because I am including Ring of Honor in what I'm about to talk about. I am including Ring of Honor. And I thought about leaving Ring of Honor out. If it wasn't for the fact that the rosters of Ring of Honor and AEW do overlap, they do interchange. When they need to fill in extra spots, they pull an ROH person. The ROH Tag Team Champions are part of an AEW faction. There are unified tag trios champions between Ring of Honor and AEW. So therefore, since these trios champions are technically the trios champions for both brands, I'm including both brands in this AEW listing. There's my logic. There's my reason for it. You have the AEW World Championship. Shout out Strickland. The AEW Women's World Champion. Timeless Tony Storm. Chef's Kiss. You have your TNT and TBS championships. I pray they get that deal signed soon because God knows what you're going to name those championships if you're no longer part of that network. Then you have the Continental Championship and the International Championship. Put a pin on those because those are the ones I want to talk about here in a minute. You have your AEW tag, your Ring of Honor tag, your AEW Unified Trios. Shout out Bang Bang Gang. Guns up. And then in Ring of Honor, aside from the tag titles, you have the Ring of Honor World Women's Championship, the Pure Championship, the TV Championship, and the recently christened Ring of Honor Women's TV Championship. Shout out Billy Starks, started from right here in Louisville. 502, still very proud of you. Now, here's my problem. As we discussed, having a secondary championship is fine. It makes sense. We get it. And even in the case of NXT, that Heritage Cup Championship, that's a specialty because that's not a typical match. There are special rules that involve the Heritage Cup. It's a takeaway from NXT UK. There's a special stipulation when it comes to that match. Those matches have to be contested under those very special rules. So that's an outlier. That is special and should be held over here. There will be one more mention of a very special championship, and we're going to get into that in the next list. But when you're looking at AEW, you have both a before I continue, I should note that the Pure Championship also does have special rules. So it's important that that is highlighted as well. The Heritage Cup Championship of NXT and the Pure Championship of Ring of Honor, there are special rules for that one. And so, yes, that's a very particular thing. So I will acknowledge that. But when you're looking at the Continental Championship and the International Championship, those are a second and third secondary championship below the AEW World title. And that makes no sense to me, especially on a show where you are able to have the ROH Pure Champion in an AEW faction who just competed Wednesday night on Dynamite. That's Wheeler Yuta. And then you have Kyle Fletcher, who's part of the Don Callis family, another faction on AEW, who's their TV champion, Ring of Honor. And then you just had competing for an opportunity at the vacated TNT Championship. You just had the ROH World Champion, Mark Briscoe. I was hesitating because I thought Mark was the wrong name. We just lost Jay Briscoe. It's Mark Briscoe that we have. Mark Briscoe, Ring of Honor World Champion. He was just competing in a match on Dynamite. So when you have access to those three other championships, why then do you need a continental champion and an international champion? Don't talk about those titles too much side by side because you're going to accidentally say intercontinental champion, which is a different company. But that's my point. And what really frustrates me is when I watch the show, there are so many champions, I forget that there are champions. There's champions that are AEW champions and champions that are Ring of Honor champions. And then I don't understand the difference between the TNT Championship division, the Continental Championship division, and the International Championship division. At least with WWE, it's we need the Intercontinental Championship, so there's a secondary channel on Raw exclusive, and we need the North American Championship, so there's a secondary title exclusive to NXT, and then we need the United States Championship, so there's an exclusive secondary title for SmackDown. That makes sense. But again, aside from the world title, as far as men's championships are concerned, and that's in quotes, but you have the TNT title, the Continental title, and the International Championship, completely ignoring the ROH World title, the ROH TV Championship, and the ROH Pure Championship. Asterisk, because the Pure title has special rules, so you have to be able to compete within those rules. That's a lot. And that's too much. I am not the only wrestling fan that says that this is too many championships. And the problem is, I can't separate the championship divisions. If you're going to point out somebody like Trent Beretta, okay? Trent Beretta is in what division, right? And when I say what division, I mean like where he is on the card. Where does that put him looking for a championship? Does it really just matter about who he's fighting? How do I know who to watch so that they fight Okada, right? Who's your continental champion? Who do I look at to say, oh, if he faces this other guy, he's definitely going against Roddy Strong, who is your your international champion? Or I look at this guy and I'm like, yeah, he's going to be the TNT title champion. But why would I want Mark Briscoe, who's the Ring of Honor world champion, who should be the top champion of Ring of Honor, and as a world champion should be seen on par with Swerve Strickland, with Moose, with Cody Rhodes, Damian Priest. He should be seen on par with those men. And you're putting him in the tournament for the TNT championship. Does that mean that as world champion, he should be striving for the TNT title? Is the TNT title above the Ring of Honor world title? Do you just make that distinction depending on who holds it? Like, what's the story? And that confusion, the fact that it's not clear, is my ultimate problem. That's the ultimate argument that I'm making. I think back to when I started watching wrestling back in like 98, maybe. Yeah, like 97, 98. And I look at that title picture, and you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, you had The Rock, you had The Undertaker, you had Kane. And these were all of your top guys. More so, well, this is the transitional spot where you had like your Bret Hart, your Shawn Michaels, and your Stone Cold Steve Austins, and your Undertakers, your Mankind's. This is really the spot where you had your Triple H, and The Rock in your Intercontinental Championship picture. And that championship picture was right below it. We could say your Ken Shamrocks, your Triple H's, this is Triple H 97, 98, not Triple H 99, 2000. But your Triple H 96, 97, 98, your Rock 97, 98, your Ken Shamrocks, your Val Venuses, your Godfathers, your Farouks, your D'Lo Browns. These were all your Intercontinental Championship guys. Owen Hart's, your Jeff Jarrett's. These were your Intercontinental guys. Okay. Your world picture, like I said, your Bretts, your Austins, your Michaels, those were your top dudes. Those are your world champions. Those were the big faces on your poster. And it was clear, it was concise. For someone like, fast forward, Jeff Hardy, who was Intercontinental Champion when he faced The Undertaker, their classic match, when Jeff Hardy fought The Undertaker for the WWF Championship, that was significant because we clearly had a champion who was not on The Undertaker's level. They competed, and that's what made that match special. And it wasn't a slight on Jeff Hardy. It was just, this is his division. This is where he ranks. This is his space. At that time, we're talking your Gangrels, your Edges, and your Christians. And when you come out of that space, from your intercontinental space, that's when we start looking at you as world championship material. Right now, if you said world heavyweight champion Chad Gable, we're not looking at that. We're not looking at that. Drew McIntyre, your Randy Ortons, even your Damian Priests, those are your world title guys. JD McDonough, Dominic Mysterio, Santos Escobar, those are not your world title guys yet. Let them prove themselves in the space of the IC title, and boom, there you go. Boom goes to Dynamite, you're moving on to the next division. That's what happened with Triple H. That's what happened with The Rock. They were top names, classic ladder match. I believe it was at SummerSlam, maybe 98. Classic ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship. Rock and Triple H. And that fast forward leads to Judgment Day 2000, where it's The Rock and Triple H in an Iron Man match for the WWF Championship. Classic. You just move them up. So in AEW right now, there is no clear, distinct line. You have world champions competing for secondary titles under different branding. And I don't know what that means. What does that say about the TNT title? What does that say about Mark Briscoe? That he's in the same space as Jack Perry. Does that mean that if Mark Briscoe is competing for the TNT championship, but so is Jack Perry, and Jack Perry wins the tournament and wins the TNT title, does that make him worthy of then the Ring of Honor world title? And if he is, does that make him also worthy of the AEW world title? And if that's true, why is he competing for the TNT title when he should just go ahead and compete against the AEW world title? Or is that title secondary? Are they equal? What does it all mean? And if you had clear, distinct lines, the last 4 minutes of my ranting and bitching would not have taken place. Like to believe I'm a well-informed wrestling fan on how things kind of work. Even when you're just looking at how things are presented as a television program, and if you're looking at it as a television program and not so much of a sport, even still, I like to believe I have enough of a grasp on things where I can see it for production value. And I am missing a lot when it comes to it. And the championship title picture is kind of my point. That's where we lose. That's where you lose me. Because no matter how good the wrestlers are in the ring, both the men and the women, their ultimate goals should be championships. Are the title situation needs to make sense. The rankings, for example, the rankings should have been clearly mentioned when we were discussing who was going for the TNT title. And I feel like if the number one person is champion and the number two person isn't, you know, start going from there. Look, things are getting muddy, and the muddier things are going, the less cohesive your stories are. The less cohesive your stories are, you might as well just stop wrestling. Otherwise, you're just doing the fun stuff because the fun stuff looks cool on TV. Speaking about where wrestling just does the fun stuff, TNA. It's the last list, I swear. I'm almost done. TNA has 6 championships. Only 6. They have the world title and the Knockouts championship. They have uh, the TNA tag and the TNA Knockouts tag. They have the X division, which again kind of has its own. It doesn't have its own set of rules, but it kind of has its own presentation. And then the Digital Media Championship, which, to be completely honest with you, I do not understand. I mean, the Digital Media Championship is like the next generation of the Impact Grand Championship, and that was a title that had its own rules. So yeah, I don't fully get the Digital Media Championship itself, but what I do understand about the Digital Media Championship is that when you look at the current champion of AJ Francis and the original champion of Jordan Grace, understand that this championship crosses that gender line, and that if Killer Kelly wanted to go for the Digital Media Championship, very well could. Which there you go. That's what's special about that title, that there is no gender marker, which kind of leads into the second half of this conversation. But 6 championships, 8 total champions. Because mind you, it's the 6 titles plus one extra person for each tag title. That's moderate. They have 1 2-hour program every week, moderate roster. These are all the necessary championships you need. When they were first talking about adding intergender tag team championships, my first and initial thought was that TNA does not have the roster or honestly the TV time to support a third tag team championship division. Doesn't. This is one of the reasons why WWE has one set of women's tag titles as opposed to the Raw women's tag team titles and the SmackDown women's tag team titles and the NXT women's tag team titles. One, that's a lot more belts. And two, neither individual program has enough of a division to warrant its own tag team championships. Now, over the course of the other brands, with Damage Control and Shayna and Zoe and the Witches, shout out Aladon. They don't. They have enough over all the brands, but they don't have enough on each individual brand. So to have one set of tag team champions defending amongst all 3 brands makes sense. There is not enough women in TNA to warrant the women's knockout tag team division plus half of the intergender tag team division. And then you're just going to have people doubling up, and then you're going to have one guy who's one half the men's tag team titles and one woman who's one half the knockouts champions, and then so they're going to hold two belts each. And it's going to be it's a lot, and to be quite honest, again, it's too much. It's too much. And then, like I said, the tweet from earlier today, or the post from earlier today, where the guy is trying to add like 3 brand new championships, a women's digital media championship, plus this new championship, plus that new championship. There's too many bloody titles. Too many. Well, now that I've spent about 40 minutes complaining about the problem, I now have to go into what's the solution. And yes, I do know that there's one more thing I mentioned. I'm going to get back to that in a sec. What do we do about it? What we do is consolidate. Wrestling as a whole is too many championships. I think TNA is good right now. We also know that some changes are coming in TNA, and we don't know exactly what those changes mean. Get to those hopefully in the next few months. We'll get some answers, but I'm hoping there will be answers around Slammiversary. We'll see. They've got Against All Odds coming up, so we'll see what we learn here in a bit. But it's time for some consolidation, right? Recently, AEW consolidated the Ring of Honor 6-man tag team championships with the AEW Trios championships because, again, they didn't need 2 separate 3-person tag team titles. Didn't. I would look at having a 3-way championship match between the TNT, Continental, International Championship, and then make sure it's elimination style. That's important. And then you would have one champion. And then that one champion would either hold the Continental Championship or the International Championship. If the Continental Champ, and then whatever belt that is, that would be part of your new Triple Crown. Because I think it's the NJPW Strong Championship, the Ring of Honor World, and the AEW Continental that are part of a Triple Crown, which is great. And we can keep that by having all these 3 champions, your TNT champion, your Continental champion, and your International champion, all compete, unify that championship. That new title is part of the Triple Crown. And that eliminates 3 championship divisions. And if you change networks, you don't have to change the title name anymore. I would do something very similar with the TBS Championship and the ROH Women's TV Championship. I know you just created that title, and I understand why it's there, but I don't think there should be a problem with having that new unified champion appearing on both your programs. They do 5 hours of TV. AEW does. It's 5 hours of AEW programming plus 1 hour of Ring of Honor. So, yeah, you can do that. That's fine. It's time we start consolidating. And if you're going to have Ring of Honor and AEW together like this is just a bonus. It's time to get rid of Rampage. Get rid of Rampage. You don't need Rampage. You have Collision. You have Dynamite. You can run consecutive stories between both. You can do a brain split if you really have to, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't bother. But you have a whole TV spot for 1 hour in Rampage, and I think that's where Ring of Honor should be going. I know it's part of Honor Club. Let's be honest, you should just go ahead and put it on cable. You already have the hour, and Rampage is useless. But if you have a brand new show with a whole different branding, and a whole new roster that we're seeing more regularly, those extra titles might actually make sense, and there'll be less confusion with the populace. My thoughts. So the answer is consolidation. Yes, it can be done. Not a whole lot you can do in the WWE side because there are the brands and there are separations for those reasons. So you're kind of stuck with all those titles. But with the addition of the Women's North American, we should probably pause on creating new titles. AEW needs to do a lot of consolidating, shrink that. Shrink it. TNA, you're good. You're good. And as I go to close on this particular episode, I lean into that last little factor. There's the thing about the digital media championship, and another thing that I'm closing my and another thing that was part of the conversation that I had, and one of the reasons why I mentioned that particular tweet in the beginning of this episode so long ago about wanting intergender tag team titles. The idea when I got I had a conversation with a guy in the TNA group was saying that he's totally behind the intergender tag team titles, and when I told him I disagreed, we got into like a good conversation. It wasn't an argument, it wasn't a fight. A conversation back and forth where we shared our thoughts. And the thought that fleshed out, because my answer was just have the intergender tag team compete for the regular tag team championships. Then he's like, well, what about the Knockouts titles? I'm like, well, Eric Young has been Knockouts champion before. But ultimately, you just need, if you're going to have that intergender team, like a Jordan Grace and W. Morrissey, or like an Orange Cassidy and Willow Nightingale, just have them compete for the regular tag team titles together. Because I'm not against intergender wrestling. Not at all. I just don't think we need a third tag team division, especially in a company as small, relatively, as TNA. That's no shade to TNA. I love TNA. I've always loved that unique wrestling space that TNA has created for itself. But it doesn't need a new tag team division. Once the titles are there, you now have to support them with a division. But just give them a really great run with the regular tag team championships. In fact, find other intergender teams, and this could just be a really interesting period in, for example, the TNA tag team division. There would be just like that year where there's the tag team championships were going back and forth between these intergender teams. I think that'd be a really interesting part of the story when you reflect on it. And I know there's going to be a lot of backlash when you're starting to look at, well, when this part ends, you're going to have these two guys beating up on a woman. Well, that's what happened in that like tournament when W. Morrissey and Jordan Grace lost that opportunity. When they lost their spot in that tournament or whatnot, they lost it to a two-man team. This is not a problem. This is just intergender wrestling, which is not new. It's been done a lot. And when I went into that argument, I was going in that discussion and I was looking at my notes and I was forming my notes out, I realized that the conversation of too many championships, which is kind of where that conversation started, or well, I guess the conversation of intergender wrestling and then the conversation of too many championships, I realized instead of talking about them together, they are two separate conversations. We can have the conversations about how muddy the waters are in the championship title picture in a place like AEW, or how there's just so many championships when you look at WWE overall, and how modest it looks in TNA in comparison. But then there's the conversation completely separate about the execution, entertainment value, and ethics behind intergender wrestling. And I realize that that's a separate conversation for a different episode. So that's next week's episode. Next week's episode, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into intergender wrestling, the value, the entertainment factor, and of course, the overall ethics of intergender wrestling in North America, particularly, and just kind of explore that. So that is my next episode. And since I've talked about the next episode, I guess it's a pretty good time to end this one. So with that, I am Dwan L. Hearn, more affectionately known as the Moon, and this has been Moon Eagles Wrestling. Thanks for joining me.